Okay, so today we learned about complex expressions, and you should have taken from the lesson that the square root of -1 is equal to I, because I squared is equal to -1. When you take the square root, you get I. So in all of these problems here, all we're doing is simplifying it the same way we would simplify a positive number, except we're going to have to add a little I to the end of it so that we can get rid of that radical negative. So in this problem, if I were to change this to the square root of -1 times 15, the square root of -1 is I, and the square root of 15 would be 3 times 5. There are no couples in that. It's already in simplified form. So this would be I times the square root of 15. Okay? Basically what I'm doing is I'm making this become an I, because the square root of -1 is I. And then I still have the square root of 15 underneath the radical. So this is going to be the same thing as, I'll write it a different way for those of you who didn't get that. It's like the square root of -1 times the square root of 2. The square root of -1 is I times the square root of -2. So this would be I radical 2. We always put the I in front of the radical because sometimes you guys write the radical too long and you don't understand where it ends. And so I don't know if that's radical 2I or if that's radical 2 times I. So we write the I in the front so that we can make sure that we know what we're doing. Okay, so here we have the square root of -1 times the square root of 25. Now the square root of 25 is 5, no radical. The square root of -1 is I, and we're multiplying those together. So 3 is going to be 5I, or I times 5. Okay, here we have the square root of -1 times the square root of 121. So the square root of 121 is 11. The square root of -1 is I. So this is going to be 11 times I, which is 11I. Square root of -24 would be the square root of -1 times the square root of 24. Now, square root of 24 is not a whole number, so I'm going to have to simplify that. 2 times 12, 2 times 6, 2 times 3. We have a set of 2's here that would come out, and we have a 2 times 3 that stays in. So this is I times, this would be 2 radical 6. So this is going to be 2I, watch how I write it, radical 6. So I put the 2 and the I, and I put the I after the 2, and then the square root of 6. So this one's going to be -1 times, square root of -1 times the square root of 48. 48 is going to be 16 times 3, and 16 is 4 times 4. So here's my couple that I have. So this is I, and this is going to be 4 radical 3. So your answer is 4I times the square root of 3. So you have I times 4 radical 3. All right, now it asks you to solve using the square root method. So here, if I'm trying to get x alone, the minute I see solve, I'm trying to get x equals. So I want to know what x equals, not x squared. So I'm going to have to take the square root of both sides. Notice we have done problems like this before. The only difference is that now we have a negative inside the radical. So -9 would be -1 times radical 9, okay, or sorry, square root of -1 times the square root of 9. So this would be I times 3. So we're going to do plus or minus because we're taking the square root, and it's going to be 3I. So 7 is x equals plus or minus 3I. On this one, to solve for x squared, we're going to subtract 49. So x squared is equal to -49. Then we're going to take the square root of, both sides. So we're going to get x equals plus or minus 7I. Number 9, we're going to divide by 3. So we have x squared equals -25. We take the square root of both sides, we get that x equals plus or minus, and this is going to be 5i. On this one, we're going to subtract 7. So we have 3x squared equals negative 39. Divide by 3. And you have x squared equals negative 13. We take the square root of both sides. You do not leave this as negative radical or radical negative 13. You have to take the I out and then do radical 13. So this is going to be x equals plus or minus I times the square root of 13. 13 cannot be simplified, so we leave it like that.